coffee at Harrington and Voss was always terrible, burnt and thin, poured from a carafe that had been sitting on the burner since 7 in the morning. But Delia Marsh drank it anyway, because it was free, and free was the only budget she had left. She had been a contract paralegal at the firm for 11 months. Not a real employee, the receptionist liked to remind her with a particular kind of smile that required no words. No benefits, no pension, no paid sick days. Just a desk in the glass-walled overflow room, a laminate badge that expired on the last Friday of every month, and a view of the Rideau Canal that she'd stopped noticing around week 3. She hadn't planned on staying this long, but then her mother's diagnosis had come in October. Stage 3, aggressive, the oncologist had said, with the careful neutrality of someone delivering weather reports, and Delia had quietly stopped applying anywhere else. She needed the hours. She needed the access. Most of all, she needed to be the kind of invisible that only a contract worker can be. She was refilling her mug when the men arrived. There were 5 of them. 2 were lawyers she recognized. Senior partners who didn't acknowledge the support staff unless they needed something carried. The other 3 were new. They came through the glass lobby doors in a loose formation, the way men move when they're used to taking up space and have never once considered apologizing for it. The man at the center was the reason the room shifted. He wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the loudest, but every eye in the open office tracked him the way a compass needle tracks north, and nobody seemed to know they were doing it. His name was Aldrich Vane. Delia knew it because she knew everything that crossed the 15th floor, and Aldrich Vane's name had been on the Harrington letterhead for weeks, attached to a restructuring deal that had made the senior partners walk faster and speak quieter than usual. He was somewhere in his early 40s, dark-haired, with the kind of angular, weathered face that looks like it was designed to be unapologetic. His suit was charcoal and expensive, worn with the ease of a man who didn't need clothes to do any work for him. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, faint and old, that no amount of wealth had smoothed away. He didn't look at Delia. She preferred it that way. She went back to her desk and pulled up the merger document she'd been tasked with cross-referencing. Routine. She was good at routine. It was the thing that had kept her functional since October, the rhythm of task, complete, next task. Don't think about the hospital appointments. Don't think about the parking fees that cost more than the treatments did. Don't think about the fact that your mother still has not told your sister how serious it is, and you are the only one carrying the weight of knowing. Just read the contract. Find the inconsistencies. Move on. She was on page 31 when she found it. It wasn't obvious, it was designed not to be. A subordinate clause tucked inside an indemnification schedule, formatted in a font size that was technically legal but practically designed to make your eyes slide past it. Delia had spent 6 years reading documents that people did not want read carefully, and she had developed a particular sensitivity to things that tried to look smaller than they were. She leaned forward. The clause transferred full operational liability for any regulatory breach, past, present, or future, from Vane Capital to the acquiring party upon execution of the merger agreement. In plain language, if Aldrich Vane had anything illegal buried in his company's history, the moment he signed, he handed that liability to the company absorbing him, not the other way around. She read it 3 times. Then she looked up. Through the glass wall of her overflow room, she could see the boardroom down the corridor. The door was closed, but the blinds were partially open. The 5 men were seated. A leather-bound agreement was being passed around the table. She could see one of the partners, Mr. Geoffrey Strand, the one who smelled like cedar and self-satisfaction, placing a silver pen in front of Aldrich Vane with the care of someone laying out a trap. Strand was presenting it. He had drafted it. Delia knew because she had cross-referenced the version history, and Strand's credentials were on the document route. Vane was reaching for the pen. Delia's heart did something unhelpful. She was a contract paralegal. She had been reminded of that fact in ways both subtle and obvious for 11 months. This was not her deal. These were not her clients. Geoffrey Strand was a partner who could end her contract with a phone call and a 2-sentence email, and she had a mother in a hospital on Smith Road who needed her to keep this job. She sat very still. Aldrich Vane uncapped the pen. Delia stood up. She walked down the corridor with a printed stack of cross-reference notes she didn't need, knocked once on the boardroom door, and pushed it open before anyone could answer. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Mr. Strand, you asked me to flag any inconsistencies in the cross-reference before execution. There's an issue with Schedule D." The room looked at her the way rooms look at things that have appeared without explanation. Geoffrey Strand's face went very carefully neutral. "Delia, this isn't the time." "Page 47, she said. She was looking at Strand, but she set the papers on the table in front of Aldrich Vane. 3rd paragraph of the indemnification clause. The liability transfer runs counter to the term sheet. Someone changed it after the initial draft. Silence. Aldrich Vane did not look at Strand. He looked at the papers she had placed in front of him. His hand, still holding the uncapped pen, paused above the signature line. "Which paragraph?" he said. His voice was low and even, with a faint trace of something that might have been a Montreal accent, worn smooth by years of speaking carefully. Delia pointed. She kept her finger on the page and didn't look away. Aldrich Vane read it once. Then again. The second time, something shifted in his expression. Not panic, not anger, but a slow, deliberate recalibration. The way a man looks when he has just realized the room he walked into is not the room he was told it was. He set the pen down. Capped it. "Get out," he said. Nobody moved. "Everyone," he clarified, with a softness that was considerably more frightening than volume. "Except her." Delia stood by the window while the room emptied. Geoffrey Strand left last, his eyes on her with an expression she filed away and intended to think about later. When the door clicked shut, Aldrich Vane leaned back in his chair and looked at her with the particular stillness of someone deciding something important. "Who are you?" he asked. "Delia Marsh. Contract, paralegal, overflow, contract." He said it without judgment. "How long have you been reading my documents?" "Since they landed on my desk. That's what I'm here for." He tapped the page. "Strand drafted this, yes, and Strand is the firm's lead partner on this acquisition, yes. So either he made an error that an overflow paralegal caught and he didn't," Vane said, "or he didn't make an error at all." "Those are the two options," Delia said. He looked at her for a long moment. She had the unnerving sensation of being read the way she read documents, carefully, without assumptions, looking for the thing that was trying to hide. "You could have said nothing," he said. "It would have been safer for you." "I know. Why didn't you?" Delia looked at the unsigned page. "My mother runs a home care business. 8 employees, mostly women who've been doing this work for 25 years. 3 years ago, she signed a service contract with a property management company that had a clause almost exactly like this one. When the company got investigated for labor violations, the liability transferred to her. She lost the business in 4 months. She paused. She's in hospital right now because the stress of that contributed to her getting sick. So when I see that clause, I don't think about whether it's my business. Aldrich Vane was quiet. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said. It didn't sound like something he said to fill space. It sounded like he meant it. "Thank you." He picked up the agreement and set it face down. "Where do you think the clause came from? Strand alone, or is there someone directing him?" "I don't know yet." "Yet," he repeated. He tilted his head slightly. "You've been looking." "I cross-reference for inconsistencies. It's my job, not this kind." She didn't answer that. He wasn't wrong. Aldrich Vane stood up. He was taller than he'd looked seated. Not dramatically, but the way that a room sometimes feels smaller when a particular person occupies it. He walked to the window. Outside, the Ottawa River was flat and silver in the November light. "Strand has been my firm's liaison for 14 months, he said, mostly to the window. "I trusted his counsel. I don't trust easily, Miss Marsh, and I'm aware that makes what happened here particularly uncomfortable for me." He turned. "I need to understand what he altered and when, and whether this is isolated or systemic. I need someone who can read the full document history without tipping off the people who'll want to bury it. You need a lawyer for that. I have 17 lawyers. I need someone who is not on anyone's payroll but their own." He looked at her directly. "Or in your case on a monthly contract that expires in 3 weeks." Delia said nothing. "I'm offering you an extended engagement. You work for me. Not the firm, not Strand, not Harrington and Voss. You report directly to me. You go through every document that has touched this deal in the last 14 months, and you tell me what you find. And if what I find is nothing, then I'll know it's nothing." He walked back to the table and placed a business card in front of her. Plain. Just his name and a phone number. "If what you find is something, I'll need to move quickly, and I'll need someone I can trust to move quickly with me." Delia looked at the card, then at him. "Why would you trust me? You've known me for 6 minutes. Because you walked into a room you had no business being in to stop a man you'd never met from making a catastrophic mistake," he said, "and you did it knowing it could cost you your job. That's not calculation. That's character." He paused. "Also, you spotted something 14 lawyers and 3 senior partners missed. So there's that." Delia picked up the card. "I'll need access to the document server," she said. "Full version history, not just current drafts. And I'll need a reason to be on the 15th floor that doesn't make Strand suspicious. That can be arranged. And my contract rate doubles." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent. "Of course." She walked back to her overflow room, sat down, and stared at the wall for approximately 30 seconds. Then she opened a new folder on her desktop, labeled it Administrative Cross-Reference, and got to work. What she found over the next 72 hours was not nothing. The clause in the merger agreement was not an error, and it was not isolated. It was the most visible corner of something much larger. Jeffrey Strand had been quietly restructuring the liability architecture of 3 separate Vane Capital acquisitions over the past year, each time shifting risk onto the acquiring party in ways that would only become visible under regulatory scrutiny. The changes were small, subtle, distributed across documents in a way that made them look like standard boilerplate, unless you were reading all 3 deals simultaneously and had a reason to be suspicious. Delia had both. She worked nights sitting in the overflow room after everyone else had gone home. The city outside her window going dark, and then gradual with the particular grey light of Ottawa in November. She drank terrible coffee. She called her sister, Renata, on her break, and listened to the careful way Renata asked how Mom was doing without admitting that she was scared. Delia said she was stable, which was true, and she would tell her more soon, which she intended to make true. She did not tell Aldrich Vane about the nights. He had given her an extension. She did not need to explain how she was spending it. On the 3rd day, she called the number on the card. He answered on the 2nd ring. "I found something," she said. "Come to the office." He gave her an address in the Byward Market District, not the firm's building. Now, if you can. She could. The office was on the 2nd floor above a restored heritage building, all exposed brick and clean lines, the kind of space that said money without saying anything so crass as money. There were 2 men she didn't recognize standing near the entrance, watchful in the particular way of people whose job is to notice things. Aldrich Vane met her in a conference room that looked out over the market. He had a pot of coffee waiting, real coffee, not the carafe sludge from Harrington and Voss. And she noted this without commenting on it. She spread her printed analysis across the table and walked him through it. She had organized it chronologically, color-coded by deal, with a summary page at the front that would have taken a junior associate 3 weeks to produce. She had done it in 72 hours because she had not slept enough, and her mother's medical bills were a number she was trying not to look at directly. He listened without interrupting. He asked 3 questions, all precise, none of them the ones she expected. When she finished, he sat back and looked at the ceiling. "Strand isn't doing this for himself," he said. "No. He's not smart enough to want this. This is someone managing him." She pointed to a note on the 3rd page. The document edits all route through a shell company that leases server space from a firm called Belcourt Consulting. Belcourt shows up on 2 of your competitors' acquisitions that collapsed under regulatory review. Both times, the liability had been structured identically. Who runs Belcourt? A man named Prescott Halford. He sits on the board of 3 financial institutions in Ontario. He's respected, he's connected, and he's been quietly dismantling Vane Capital's legal protections for over a year, which suggests someone hired him to do it. Probably someone who wants you exposed to regulatory liability before a specific date. Aldrich Vane's expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The quality of the stillness shifted. "There's a Senate committee review of the Ottawa Logistics Corridor project in 6 weeks, he said slowly. Vane Capital holds the development rights. And if you're under a liability investigation when the committee convenes, Delia said, you lose the contract, worth $800 million. I know, he looked at her. The fluorescent overheads of the conference room were not flattering lights, but he didn't look at her like she was something to be lit flatteringly. He looked at her the way she'd noticed he did everything, directly, and without waste. You put this together in 3 days, he said. I had good material to work with. You had obfuscated server logs and version histories, and the kind of document trail that a forensic accountant would have charged 6 figures to reconstruct. My father was a forensic accountant, she said. He taught me to read money the way other people read books. She was quiet for a moment. He died when I was 19. Before my mother's business collapsed. Before she stopped. This was more than she intended to say. Before a lot of things. Aldrich Vane didn't fill the silence with something soft and useless. He simply nodded and moved on, and she appreciated him for it more than she expected. I need Harford's authorization files, he said. If he's been moving liability, there's a transaction record that his shell company can't fully obscure. But getting access to those records requires someone with standing inside the Belcourt structure. Belcourt runs a quarterly legal compliance review for the financial institutions on Halford's board, Delia said. It's a courtesy exercise. They bring in outside paralegals and junior associates to process the filings. The next review is in 8 days. I can submit as contract support. Aldrich Vane looked at her. Delia. She noticed it was the first time he'd used her first name. You understand that if Halford realizes what we're looking for. I'm a contract paralegal from a mid-tier firm, she said. No one looks at the contract paralegal. I looked at you. She held his gaze and did not let herself read anything into that. "That's because I walked into your boardroom." He was quiet for a long moment. "If anything feels wrong, you leave. You don't push. You walk out," agreed. "And you take this with you." He opened a drawer and placed a small device on the table. A document scanner no larger than a thumb drive. Anything you find, you copy. You don't take originals. You don't alter anything. You photograph and leave. Are you worried about evidence contamination or criminal liability? Both. She picked up the scanner. "I'll need the names of the 3 financial institutions, and a plausible reason to be at Belcourt that doesn't look like it came from your office. I have a colleague. She runs a small compliance consultancy in Kanata, Simone." He paused. "She knows about this situation. She can put your name forward through legitimate channels, and how many people know, including you?" 3. She thought about that. $800 million a year of careful sabotage, a Senate committee in 6 weeks, and 3 people in the room. "All right," she said. Belcourt Consulting occupied a clean, modern suite in a building on Albert Street that smelled of paper and climate-controlled air. The quarterly compliance review was exactly what it appeared to be on the surface. Tedious, methodical, the kind of work that attracts people who are either very detail-oriented or running low on options. Delia was both. She had been assigned to a room with 4 other contract workers. They were given a cart of physical filings and access to Belcourt's internal document system. The work was straightforward. Nobody looked at the contract paralegal. Delia worked steadily for 6 hours. She processed every filing she was assigned and made no errors and generated no questions. She ate lunch at her desk. A sandwich from the building's lobby cafe. The kind of thing you eat when you need to stay in a room and not draw attention by leaving. She checked her phone twice, both times texts from her sister about their mother's blood work. She replied each time and then put the phone away and went back to work. In the final hour, she found the file she was looking for. It was not labeled in any way that suggested importance. It was a routine liability transfer authorization, filed under a client code that would mean nothing unless you already knew what you were looking for. Delia knew because she had spent 3 nights learning the architecture of Belcourt's coding system, and because her father had once told her that people who hide money always hide it in the most boring container they can find. She photographed every page. Her hands were steady. She had her father to thank for that too. He had brought her along on jobs when she was a teenager, and she had learned that the only useful thing to be when you're looking at something that could hurt someone is quiet. She submitted her hours at the end of the day, collected her badge at reception, and walked out into the cold November air of downtown Ottawa. She did not call Aldrich Vane until she was 6 blocks away and certain she was not being followed. He answered before it rang. "I have it," she said. His exhale was the only time she'd heard anything that sounded like relief from him. "Come to the Byward office. I have someone waiting who can authenticate." She was halfway there when she noticed the black sedan. It was nothing specific at first. Ottawa traffic in the late afternoon is dense and unremarkable, but it made the same turn she did at Rideau Street, and then the same turn again at Sussex Drive, and Delia had been raised by a man who dealt in the secrets of other people's money, and she had learned early that paranoia is only irrational until it isn't. She didn't run. Running draws attention. She turned into a hotel lobby on Mackenzie Avenue, large, open, full of the particular anonymity of a place where everyone is from somewhere else, walked through to the other exit, and came out on a side street. The sedan did not follow. She texted Aldrich Vane. Taking alternate route, slight delay. 3 dots appeared immediately. She arrived at the Byward office 12 minutes later. He met her at the door. He looked at her face and seemed to read what she didn't say about the sedan, because he stepped aside to let in a man she didn't recognize, 50s, grey-haired, with the patient expression of someone who has authenticated a great many documents in his career, and said quietly to Delia, "You're all right. Yes, someone followed you, tried to." She handed over the scanner. "It's all there." The authentication took 2 hours. The result was unambiguous. The authorization files linked Belcourt's liability transfers directly to Prescott Harford's instructions, executed on behalf of a numbered company that traced back. After several careful steps that the grey-haired man navigated with professional calm to a competitor holding company that stood to gain the logistics corridor contract if Vane Capital was disqualified. Aldrich Vane sat across from her when it was done. The office was quiet. The market outside had settled into its evening rhythm. "This is enough," the grey-haired man said, gathering his materials. "More than enough." He left. The door clicked behind him. Aldrich Vane poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of Delia. She drank it without comment because she was tired, and it occurred to her, somewhat dimly, that she hadn't had anything to drink since the lobby cafe sandwich 4 hours ago. Strand will be contacted tonight, he said. His options are limited. Halford will be harder, but the documentation makes it a matter of when, not whether. He looked at her. The Senate review is in 6 weeks. With this in front of them, the committee will see a manufactured liability attempt and will weight the contract application accordingly. Good, Delia said. You did this, he said. It wasn't an elaborate statement. It was direct, the way everything he said was direct. I read some documents. You rebuilt a year of obfuscated transactions in 72 hours, and then walked into a building belonging to the people trying to dismantle me, and walked back out with the key that undoes it. He paused. Don't minimize it. She looked at her water glass. My mother's stable, for now. The oncologist thinks the current round of treatment may be working. She wasn't sure why she said it. Something about the exhaustion, maybe, or the fact that she had been holding everything at the right angle for weeks, and she was very tired. I'm glad, he said, quietly. The business she lost, the home care agency. She built it from nothing after my father died. 15 years, Delia looked up. She never rebuilt it. She didn't have anything left. Aldrich Vane was quiet for a moment. Then, what would it take to rebuild something like that? Licensing, insurance, staffing, a space. Someone willing to take the liability risk on a new business with an operator who has a previous closure on her record, even if the closure wasn't her fault. She paused. More than we have. He reached across the table and placed a business card, different from the first one, heavier stock, with a second number handwritten beneath the printed one. When your mother is ready, if she wants to try again, call that number. Delia looked at the card. This isn't charity, he said, before she could speak. I don't believe in charity. I believe in correcting outcomes that were engineered to be unfair. What happened to your mother's business was engineered. The same pattern, the same clause, possibly the same actors. This is a correction. She picked up the card. I'll tell her, she said. He stood up when she stood, walked her to the door. In the doorway she stopped and turned. Why did you look at me in the first place in that boardroom? Every other partner in that building has been looking through me for 11 months. He considered this, seriously, the way he seemed to consider everything. Because you were the only person in the building who seemed to know what was actually in front of them, he said. And because you were scared, and you walked in anyway. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded and walked out into the cold Ottawa night. 3 months later, on a Tuesday in February that was clear and blue and very cold, Delia Marsh was sitting in a sun-filled office on the second floor of a building in the Glebe neighborhood, reviewing the licensing documents for a new home care business called Marsh Community Care. 8 employees, most of them with 20 years of experience between them, operating under a contract structure that had been reviewed by an independent legal team and contained no subordinate clauses, no liability transfers, and nothing that required anyone to trust the fine print. Her mother was seated across from her, looking better than she had in a year, reading the agreement with the particular attention of someone who has learned to be thorough. This part here, her mother said, tapping a page. The liability shield is actual, Delia confirmed. Not cosmetic. It's what it says it is. Her mother looked at her over her reading glasses. You read everything. Yes, your father would be. She stopped, smiled instead of finishing, which was its own kind of completion. Delia's phone buzzed on the desk. A message from a number she recognized. The Belcourt case resolved this morning. Halford entered a consent agreement. Strand's license has been suspended. Senate committee convenes next week. Then a second message. I also put a good coffee machine in the overflow room at Harrington. You can thank me later. She smiled in spite of herself. Her mother looked up. Good news? Someone corrected an outcome, Delia said. That's all. Her mother nodded, as though this was a perfectly complete answer, and went back to reading the fine print with the care of someone who had learned, finally and irreversibly, to always read it first.